Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. Today we have a special guest, Kindness Seeker Mao from the Men Are Human Discord server and weekly Saturday YouTube stream. Welcome. And today we're going to give you all a short explanation of why we are in the MRM and some talk about why the men's rights movement has become so fragmented, and then wrap it up with some solutions that we've all looked at. So pull up a stump and join us. And as our special guest, Mao, would you mind introducing yourself first and then maybe give a little background on how you ended up here?
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me here. So yeah, I'm Mao. Mao of the Maui people, but people always know me as Kindness Seeker Mao. So like I've been in I've been calling me an MRA since I was like 20 years old. But like my activism began like much earlier. It's like very long story, but I'll try to make it shorter. So when I was like 12 years old, I was in high school and I was trying to get into some sort of activism, and the options that were available to me were like the civil rights movement, which were very like focused on race, which I wasn't very interested, to be honest. I wasn't really focused on race. Um, and then it was like feminism. That was like the two options, the two most popular options for activism. And what got me to that point was like my main focus, my main like pet peeve was homelessness, because the area that I was in, it was like filled with I don't know how to describe it, like crushing absolute homelessness, where the type in which people like actually die exposed to the elements and all of that. So I was really concerned about that, because I saw that as like a sign of I saw that as a form of betrayal, like society not making sure there's like a safety net to ensure that people don't fall into homelessness and die. So that's the reason that got me motivated originally. It was the homelessness. And at that point in my life, obviously, me being 12 years old, um, I wasn't seeing the specific sex-based discrimination. Even though, like, looking back at it nowadays, I can totally see that I was also surrounded by a high amount of men who were divorced, and they have everything was taken away from them, like the car, the house, the children. There were like a lot of people like that surrounding me, and I guess at that time I didn't see it as a big deal, but now I do. But yeah, like my priorities were like homelessness, and that got me interested in like human rights, because I saw like making sure people don't fall into homelessness as like a human rights priority. So like I said, like when I was in high school, there were like a lot of like library groups that you can join, and the two main ones were like the civil rights one and the feminist book group. And so I joined the feminist, thinking, because I also like I was friends with like a regular feminist girl that was a classmate. She told me like feminism can also take care of homelessness. So I guess that got me interested in joining. And I was there for like a month trying to gather knowledge about it all. And it wasn't like that interesting, to be honest. It was mostly people talking about marching for gay marriage, which I was in favor, but it was kind of disappointing. But one of the things that got me got me out of it was actually coming across two young radical feminists who actually they introduced me to very like radical books like Bell Hooks and Andrea Dworkin's. And actually me reading those got me very I don't know how to say, it was got me into a very depressed, nihilistic position in which I was very demotivated. So I got out of like my desire for becoming a human rights activist got like pretty squashed because of that experience. I really didn't see anyone who was interested in what I was interested in. I guess at that time I saw a lot of people as grifters, even though that word wasn't like available at that time. But I guess that's the word that I would use nowadays. But yeah, pretty demotivated. So I just continue with my life, um, abandoning my desires for activism until I was like 18 years old. And on a whim, I tried to regain that lost passion. But I did it like online. I began like trying to voice my opinion online, getting into different forums and such. And one time, um, it was like in a YouTube video. I was debating with some people, and it was about statistics about rape, violence, and something else. I don't know. And someone called me an MRA, but at that time I had no idea what an MRA was. So I just Googled it, and that's how I found actually the men's rights movement. It was because of a dumb YouTube comment section debate. So I saw them, and I joined in to see what it was all about. And my first impression was like they was again coming from a very nihilistic, defeated position of they must be just like the feminists, because still at that time I haven't come across someone who was very interested in human rights for all. But the more I stuck around, the more I was looking for a confirmation of my biases. I was waiting for the shoe to drop for the MRAs to reveal themselves as hypocrites, just like the feminists. And then so I continue like hanging out in those spaces in those forums for like a year, and then I realized at some point like the shoe never dropped. I was agreeing more and more with them, um, and when I was like 20 years old, I began calling myself an MRA because like I realized I totally agree with them, and they weren't like horrible hypocrites. That I actually found a place filled with genuine people that care about like human rights, and that really unlocked a lot of things that I have neglected, especially like the main thing that I always saw, which was sex-based discrimination. Everything like came into focus at that point. I was like thinking to myself, this all makes sense. There's a reason why the majority of homeless people I see are men. And this I had the same revelation with everything else, which wasn't much of a revelation, but like it made me feel like I was grappling with a way to finally tackle the issue, because I was getting closer to the truth instead of like a very amalgamous, very gray shape problem like I used to see it. I saw a lot of human rights problems as untackable, always constant human problems throughout history. But because of the MRM, I finally like regained hope about how to fix things. So, so yeah, that's like my origin story in the MRM. Um, and but I never got to hear your story, Taz, about how you all began. And I think it goes for everyone. I think I haven't heard them.
Okay, well, I'll go next then. Yeah, mine starts a really long time ago. And it starts kind of like yours from, a place of not being aware, um, and not being, I guess, oh, allowed to see, what was happening to me, and to, well, really other people like me, and especially other men like me. Um, it started when I was 5 years old, and I was the victim at that time of uh, fairly long-term and regular sexual abuse by a family member, um, apparently with the knowledge of the other family members. Um, and it didn't stop until my family broke up. My parents divorced. This was back in 1970, was when my parents divorced. Um, and I moved or my mother moved I and my brothers to where she grew up, from where I live now, which is in the Midwest, out to Wyoming, which is where she grew up. And I finished growing up out there, learned how to drink, uh, or learned how to drink the way I drank anyway. And uh, eventually, before I graduated high school, it got bad enough that everyone kind of decided that it would be safer for me and everyone else if I came back to where I was, around here, Illinois, um, to stay with my father and get a job and go to school and not need to have a car because everyone was scared to death that I was gonna, drive off a cliff out there or something, or, kill somebody or whatever. But they assumed that I would be safe. Of course, it didn't work out that way. But I did get a job and I did manage to keep it, and uh, went to college and graduated, and uh, got married and started a career. And my drinking kept getting worse, and I started becoming pretty self-destructive, eventually suicidal, and got divorced and lost everything. Um, Drank my way out of jobs and uh, into the gutter pretty much. Became homeless. No job, no friends. All of that, and lost a nice home and two cars in the garage and literally a picket fence. No kids, but that was a different discussion. Um, but it's one that I remain grateful for. And I uh, got very low and got very, I get, more suicidal, and more suicidal attempts, ideations. Drinking got much, much worse, and hospitalizations, treatment centers, huge amounts of money. But the point was that it was all the treatment and all of the uh, kind of support that I was getting was directed at me fixing myself, and me being, I guess, a better man than I had become, without any, avenue to deal with what happened to me, and what I might do about it. or what might be done for me about it at that, at some point I really didn't care, as long as something got done. But there was just this intense pressure that that I somehow become a changed person. And I said I never made it a secret that I needed help. And I asked for help, and I did the work that I was directed to do to get that help. I spent enough money that I could buy another house and a really nice car. I got myself involved, in recovery and all that. And like I said, the trouble is it didn't do any good, you know. Um, I got sicker and sicker and sicker. And what I got, instead of any kind of support or real solutions, what I got from everyone was bitterness and resentment and fear and anger and mistrust and eventually indifference and abandonment. And the further I look into it, the more I have a hard time blaming the people, who were closest to me, because they didn't have any avenues to get help either. And it's not like they didn't want to. I tell people that, now that I'm better, and I'm doing okay, right? I look back and I see that many other people, especially men who have recovered, right, that used to be, aggressive and angry and violent and dangerous, once they turn that corner and get better, and heal up, their uh, their relationship to themselves and others. The irony is those men are very often forgiven, and they're brought back into their family and their friend circles, their communities. They get their jobs back sometimes, all of that. But I tell people one thing I know of that you don't get forgiven for, and that is if you get people to care about you, and really love you and invest themselves in you, and then you burn your own life to the ground over and over again while they watch. They never forgive you. That's I expect not to have any of those people in my life ever again. And I just kind of have to live with that. But the reason that I ended up in spaces like this is that the uh, the the level of help and support for anyone like me, regardless of their gender or sexuality or whatever, what their chromosomes are, it's not that good. It's not. But even as insufficient as it is, it's heavily balanced in favor of women. Earlier today, I was at a meeting of a men's trauma group that I attend, and a common topic of discussion, is the difference between, for example, treating and supporting traumatized men as opposed to traumatized women, which of necessity it's a different we need a different solution, right? We can't be dealt with very often the way women are. There's nothing wrong with that. That's as it should be, right? And specifically, especially for men, it can make a difference whether that man is, for example, gay or straight, or working class like myself, or upper class like some of the other guys in the meeting, what their ethnicity or race is. it does matter. But like I said, the limiting factor every time is this a guy? And if it is, then it just doesn't seem to get the world doesn't grind to a halt in order to make sure we're okay. And in that case, it just really compounds the disadvantages for anybody, who's disabled or, gender nonconforming or, like I say, gay. Because on top of all that, that they're male, right? And that apparently makes us some kind of a black box, that can't be, penetrated. We can't be gotten to, right? And, the facilitator and my other therapists, plural, they have no problem getting past all that for me, but as I point out to them so often, what that makes them is rare, and what that means is they're always going to be overworked, they're always going to be under-resourced, and they're always going to be having to, go to the therapeutic community at large and trying again and again to explain what it's like to work with us. And they all freely admit, yeah, if you were women, it would be different. This is why, for me, being part of the men's movement means focusing, on our ability to attend to and ask for help with the condition of our minds and our hearts. Because if we can't do that, then we're always on our back foot and we're always open to being accused of being unstable, dangerous, crazy, toxic, ignorant, and unenlightened. Yeah. But one thing I have found is that if I get good enough, and if I get generous enough with my own ability to attend my mental and emotional health, then I can go into those other spaces and say, look, don't take me as a model, right? Because I'm the exception to prove the rule. And the rule is that men don't get help, right? And men need to fix themselves, right? That seems to be the rule. As long as that's the rule, for every one of me, you can just look behind me and there's 10,000 others just suffering and dying. So I guess that's why I'm here. And tall lady, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Sorry, I have to make this quick. Apparently gotta leave earlier than sooner because of the riot downtown. Now they're closing things a lot earlier, so fun things living in violent cities. How I got in the MRM. See, I would like to blame society for why I got in the MRM. But that doesn't really quite do justification. And it's really a bunch of factors. The first thing that people always plan, which is pretty obvious. I mean, I got one parent who's always been the men's rights movement, so that really influenced my life growing up. Very equal and being raised, very equal, just being told, he can hit you, you can hit him, same things happen, you shouldn't do it. And then those kinds of concepts. And then just growing up with so many male friends that I had, I never quite got along with females. I never really could do the sisterhood. I never had a real like female group. I get along with females. I had friends that were female, but I never really had a sisterhood. That was just something I couldn't ever get around to. It is just something I couldn't. The structure of it, the toxicity of it, sometimes is a little too sickening for me. So I had a lot of male friends growing up, and then so it was a lot of like people who became like older brother figures, just friends, supportive people in my life who were all male. As I was growing up, it was just, I was realizing how differently they got treated than I did. In terms of they ended up in the office a lot more. They got called out a lot more for small things. I would see them put absolute resistance on some of the most terrible things some of these girls would do. Talking about growing up in violent cities. The amount of fights I would see females get in and not condemned for, but if a guy just even talked smack about another guy and they got an argument, they were sent to the office. It was absurd. They were just so much tougher on them, and they were always saying lies about them. Like, I know what's popular now is fighting against what's it called, the uniform rule, about the fact that you got the 3-finger rule for skirts and shorts, where if it's above 3 fingers for girls specifically, it's wrong. And when you ask teachers why that's the case, especially female teachers are one always answering that question. They say it's because you're distracting the boys. And yet the boys were never distracted. They didn't really care. But they were always saying everything's the fault of the boys. And that was what we were practically taught. And that seemed really messed up. God, this is where it starts getting hard. Then we got high school, and I don't have the stats on hand, but I'm taking this history prison class around. They're showing stats for adults, and it's so the arrest rate at 18, apparently, supposedly, based on all these different stats, it is lower than the arrest rate at 22. What I couldn't stand is I saw no arrest rate or imprisonment rate or anything like that for 16, 17, 14, 15. Because that was my high school experience, was watching the friends I cared about end up in juvie. And not end up in juvie because they got in some shit. I mean, 1 or 2 of them maybe. But mainly just because of BS. Someone falsely accused them. Someone, got a small tit for tat. I mean, I know this kid, he got falsely accused by these girls. Dean didn't even decide to investigate the situation. He just gave him an infraction. No one realizes you have to write a whole ass paper about why you got that infraction. Wow, I should stop swearing. Sorry. Whoops. Just caught myself on that. But, you have to write a whole paper to explain your infraction, why you got it, yada, 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 about that infraction. And it really just sort of, no matter how good of a student you are, it sort of criminalizes you to have that infraction. And it felt like almost anything of being a guy was practically criminalized. Like, oh, stop with the locker room talk, stop with being toxic, stop talking shit to each other, they would wrestle sometimes for fun. That was fine. It was when you got in a real fight that was the problem. But the problem was the school practically criminalized even the small wrestling they do in hallways and stuff. My friend tried to give me a piggyback ride once. I wasn't the one who got in trouble. It was my friend who got in trouble. He's the one who got in trouble for giving me a piggyback ride. I'm the one who asked for the piggyback ride. And girls don't really realize how much power they have. I got a friend, he ended up 3 to 4 months in juvie. And he was with this girl. The girl liked him, the mom didn't. And so the mom got a court order of protection against him. restraining order. That's what it's called. He followed it, but the problem is they still went to the same school. So one day when they were in the hallway, he didn't see her right away in the hallway. She was around the corner. He went and confronts friend who was nearby her, and he didn't realize she was there till he like popped his head over and saw her like behind in the corner. And he was like, oh, and he ran away. He didn't want to break it. There was nothing done to her. There's nothing bad done to her. Nothing happened at all. But I guess somehow or another it got reported, whether she reported herself or she told her mom or an administrator who didn't like him saw it, because the administrators were pretty corrupt at the high school he went to be fair. Nonetheless, he got sent to juvie for 3 or 4 months for that. And there was like all his teachers, everyone, they were just, you know, they were saying he hasn't done anything, you know, why are you putting him in jail for this? He hasn't done anything bad. He hasn't broken nothing. Like, yeah, and he did not come out the same person. Rehabilitation does not work. Jail does not work. Rehabilitation has never worked. People don't realize that. Because, yeah, it sounds nice, but we do not know as humans how to do that. Our history of prison with rehabilitation just end up putting people in solitary and then groups that are probably possibly dangerous individuals scare them in a room, and they're just taken away from society, and all it does is it really, really screws them in the head. You know, they don't learn, they don't really get better there. And you know, now with poor resources or almost no resources and whatever else is going on there, and I go on that forever, but you know, thanks to my father, he never pushed the men's rights movement to us. He never told us you have to be that. He never really talked about it with us, to be honest. I started getting into it actually after high school. I was already sort of into high school, but I didn't know the title of it. I just knew that I hated seeing my friends being put in jail. I hated seeing my friends given infraction. I hated seeing that there were girls doing 20 times things as worse and they were not being held accountable. They were given no responsibility for their actions or accountability. They were given no responsibility at all. She was doing bad. Well, it must be something wrong with the system. He's doing bad. Well, it's his own fault. He ain't studying. And you know, I saw my friends coming out of these joints really messed up, and then we got into COVID my senior year, and it was silent, dead silent. None of us could see each other, and I was frankly bored out of my mind, really bored out of my mind. And my father would have the weekly meetings, and he'd have them not in person, obviously, but through Zoom in the house. And at first I wasn't really interested. I was like, you know, I'm more concerned about high school, whatever's going on in my life, my friends, talking to them. You know, as I got more and more bored, and I really couldn't really speak to my friends, I started listening in more and joining in more. And I joined officially in these meetings. He added me on the email list, and that's really what started getting me more officially in the movement.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dead Duck.
Hello. Oh, right. My origin story. It's very similar to everybody else's, maybe slightly different. I always had an inkling that what we were being taught didn't match up to reality, as it were. I then saw a documentary on Channel 4, which for the people not in the UK is literally what it says it is. It's a TV channel. It was the 4th one that went to air. You know, we're really clever over here, so everything gets named, you know, Channel 1, BBC 1, BBC 2, ITV, and Channel 4. And the documentary was about a group of guys who have been abused by their wives. One of them in particular, I'll never forget was a police officer. And British police officers have to be a certain size and everything else. And this guy was saying, he could have easily hit his wife back, and he would have killed her because of his size. So, there was that was sort of influencing my thoughts. Summertime would come round in the school, or wintertime would come round, and the girls would be allowed to change their school uniforms and the boys wouldn't. We had to keep wearing the same thing all year round. So you realised fairly quickly, well, that's not on. That's not fair. Then, life takes twists and turns, and it does. I ended up moving to around the corner from where I now live, married, all the trappings of that. And the marriage wasn't a very good one, to say the very least. It was fairly traumatic to deal with. And I started looking into some of the thoughts I was having about my life and what have you. And then a young lady by the name of Cassie J dropped the Red Pill documentary on us all. And, YouTube and the internet in 2016 was what it was. There was controversy about the film. I decided to sit down and watch it, and that was it. Revelation time. This was the epiphany, moment of clarity, as it were. So I've called myself an MRA ever since 2016. I've been lucky enough to meet several people that were in that documentary, or at least speak to them. And I've gained an awful lot of good acquaintances from the movement. I've been able to exert some influence on the young generations that will follow me through the future. And I hope to a certain degree I've been able to help those that needed it most when they needed it, particularly through my participation in the Discord server. So, yeah, that's pretty much it as far as an origin story goes. It was just, as with everybody else, it was sort of life experience, really, more than much else.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks. Thank you for that. You and I have, in our discussions together, I kind of managed to get most of that in pieces, but it's good to kind of hear it all at once. It kind of strikes me that just among the four of us here, and the few other MRAs that I've managed to get close to, everybody has a different backstory about how they ended up here. Some of them pretty dire. Some of them, like Mao, a lot of your story is, I think it just comes from the fact that, you're a good person and you care about people. And, my rant is, when I'm being challenged on even why I'm here is, that should be the number one reason, right? It is that, people try to do good and care about each other. Because the upside of being here, from unpleasant or disastrous previous experience, the good side of that is that's a very strong motivator. The downside, though, is that it makes it hard, to get started with a clear head sometimes, right? We talk about red pill rage, and being kind of stuck in, our own bitterness or despair or resentment or mistrust, and that it hinders progress and makes us vulnerable to being blamed for our own problems. I had the good fortune that the rest of my recovery and the rest of my healing demanded that I relinquish and give up things like bitterness and resentment and anger and mistrust, because for most people, let's face it, those things are very unpleasant and they're very limiting and make one unhappy, but it doesn't kill them, right? And those are the things that kill people like me left, right, and center, right? We die like flies unless we really, manage to let go of stuff like that. It's very hard, and sometimes it's tedious and painful and complicated, but it's, the difference between either being here or not. So I wasn't offered the choice of, be an MRM and be angry, or be an MRM and be like happy. So you're either going to be, a happy MRM or just another dead guy. Pick one. That's that's not very nice, but that's the way it was. Anyway, it kind of takes us into the next thing I wanted to talk about is, how fragmented our movement can be. I think a lot of it comes from that. The different reasons why we end up here. To be honest, I wish that everybody in the men's movement, was here for the same reason that the two of you are, Dead Duck and Mao. Because, it certainly it was not easy, and, for both of you, there were traumatizing and disrupting events, that got you here. But when people ask me, so what is a good MRA? I think of people like you, that I can say, not all of us are like brought into this by horrible events from the past, and not all of us are stuck in that outrage cycle. Some of us are just really good people that see a bad situation, want to do something about it. It's not that complicated. But right now, a lot of the pardon the expression, discord, or at least difficulty with coherence, is just from the simple fact that some of us come here looking for a place, to wallow in misery with others, and be just perpetually outraged, and to look for the unending list of reasons, to point the finger and say, look how terrible these people are. And whenever I see too much of that, I start thinking, I spend time in some of those other spaces, and too often, they say the same thing about us. and it's like, when I, now that I've kind of gotten to know you, Mao, a lot more, and I've, had the privilege of knowing you, Dead Duck, for kind of a while, and also Darkisha, the tall lady, and some others, I don't have a problem looking those people in the face and saying, some of that is here. Some of what you're talking about is in our movement. Some of what you're talking about is in your movement. I said, but, I can look you in the face and tell you, many of the people in our movement, and that are dedicated, to the well-being of men, they're kind of doing it because of the kind of people they are, and the kind of, I guess, the way you look at the world. I mean, I try to emulate that. I try to be like that. I try to be, someone doing what he's doing because it's the right thing to do, and not at the expense of healing from everything that happened to me, but at the same time, not at the expense of doing the right thing, and the kind of people in these other spaces that I talk to about this, they feel the same way, right? They are disheartened, and kind of baffled by a lot of what they see in their own movement, and how frustrating it is for them. The facilitator in my men's trauma group, she's got kind of an activist bent of her own, considering the job she has. But the fact of the matter is, she does what she does, because she's like you guys, and I like to think like me. She sees a potentially disastrous situation and tries to do something about it because it's the right thing to do. And to be selfish about it, frankly, we have to live on the same planet as all these other people, right? The ones that are being victimized and ruined, right, and unmade. We have to live with them, and we also have to live with, unfortunately, with the people that that perpetrate and exploit and take advantage of and make money off of. I hate to say it, guys, but there are people out there that they make really good money, right, and acquire like significant influence, just by trying to make us look stupid and unbalanced and problematic and toxic, and they get as much of that, of those rewards, from the fact that we give them our attention, as the attention being given to them by a casual consumer, or their own people, right? And when I point that out in these other spaces, I do, the reason I say it that way is because I want them to know that if they want to be good people, right, and if they want this to get better because it needs to get better, right, then any attention paid to those people that are just really making bank off of this whole thing, it robs them of their purpose, and it robs them of their own efforts, right? It robs us of our efforts, and it makes it so that, and I know you guys have both heard me say this, it ensures that this is never going to be over with, because the last thing they want, right, is for this to be resolved and these things to get better. But for me, I mean, like I say, I don't like, or sorry, it's very unwise for me to be outraged, and for me to be resentful, or mistrustful or bitter is, like I say, I can die from that, right? It's pretty quick. But, more importantly, I want this to be over with, if and I tell people, if that means somebody's got to win, well, so be it, but I, for one, really don't care. I have already sacrificed everything, that I ever cared about. It's gone and it won't be back. I personally am going to be living out my life the way I live it, and my motive for doing what I do, is that, like I say, I want you guys grandkids to be able to look back at us, and just be completely dumbfounded that this was ever a problem. I want them to look at the works of people like Bell Hooks, and Warren Farrell, and ask each other, really, was this the best they could do? I want them to look at the works of Andrea Dworkin and Paul Elam and say, man, our grandfolks, they were knuckleheads. I want that, because if things go right, that'll be true. It'll be, it'll be something that was just like a bad footnote in human history. It doesn't need to continue like this. We could do better, but as I tell people, the longer we wait, the more hard work it's going to take, and the more people are going to have to give up. The more things that they care about, they're going to have to sacrifice. They have to live without, at least for a while, maybe a long while. But the clock is ticking, and our ability to do something about it before, catastrophe is running out. So anyway, what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, in terms of the movement being fractured, it doesn't help when you've got people with obvious problems involved with the movement. And I don't just mean recovering from trauma or anything else. They've got traumas they haven't even begun to look into, let alone recover from. So that certainly doesn't help matters. Also, we need to remember there's a difference between the different factions of what is termed the men's movement. I mean, men's rights activists and MGTOW, so men going their own way, see eye to a certain degree, but MGTOWs have decided that it's pointless even trying, so they're going to take their ball and go home. The incels will tell you they never really had the ball to begin with, so what's the point? They're just going to stand over here and be angry and everything else. And you've got the pickup artist side of it, which is I personally think that's just about the most disgusting side of all this. is the pickup artist, because they use certain truths and everything else to further victimize some women in society and make things that much harder for the rest of us. You know, I mean, how many times have each of you been called a misogynist because you support men's issues? You know, so
Right. Yeah.
you look at it from those points of view, and it's easy to see why the movement is so fractured. You know, at the end of the day, all MRAs want is, let's get some balance in the world. Let's let's give these issues a fair shake and see if we can't solve them. You know,
Right.
let's get rid of the bias in the family courts, for example. That's all MRAs really want. There are so many women that are men's rights activists. It's unbelievable. But, you know, of course, that's a different conversation entirely because of the way they get treated from outside of the men's movement, and occasionally from inside of it by men who are just unbelievably angry, unbelievably hurt, and don't understand that these women actually want to help. They want to try and solve the issues.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, that's my take on it. I don't know what Mal has to say.
I totally agree with you two guys. I'm coming from the position that when I say like the MRM being fragmented, I'm talking about everyone who self-identifies as an MRA. So I do obviously exclude the PUAs and the MGTOWs and what are the other ones? Red pillars. And those are the I don't know, the manosphere, whatever they want to call themselves. So I put like MRM straight like in the category of human rights activism. So I just see them, every single group as very separate. So yeah, when it comes to the fragmentation within the group, talking about people who call themselves MRAs, and they're coming from with very different perspectives about what's even an issue to begin with and how even to solve it. Because like there's one thing that is very positive about the MRM, which is very like politically neutral. You don't have to be like from any specific politic branch to be part of it, you know? Because like I don't know if you guys know about Jonathan Haidt moral foundations. So Jonathan Haidt is like I think he's like a neuroscientist or something like that, psychologist. And he actually developed like this really good categories about what humans like, the moral foundations that humans care the most about, and how he categorizes them. So the most important ones are like care versus harm, liberty versus oppression, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, sanctity versus degradation. So this is very important because I do believe in these moral foundations, and the MRM appeals to all of them. So we can go like point by point, and the MRM is about like harm reduction. When we advocate for the absolute removal of like genital mutilation, we are appealing to that moral foundation. People who are like, we need to care about people and harm reduction, they come to the movement because of that, because we are appealing to them. We're also appealing to fairness, because it is unfair that some people get mutilated. It is unfair that little infant children get such a horrible form of sexual abuse and torture. We're also, appealing to sanctity, the sanctity of the human body. too. We're appealing to liberty. And, if we go point by point with every single thing that the MRM proposes, we are hitting all of those like moral trigger points. We're getting so many people from all of the political spectrum. They're all coming together because we attract them, because we are appealing to all of those moral foundations. Like, and it can be with anything, like, for example, the disproportionate, like, incarceration of men compared to women, like, given larger sentences to men for like the same crime and same level of violence as a woman. That's not fair. Where's the loyalty in that? Where's the fairness? We can do especially with paternity frauds, the family court bias against men. All of those things are so important because we can see that people are coming together because they agree, and we are supplying them with an explanation for why they believe this feels wrong. Because when someone says, like, I don't know, like my uncle, he can't even see his children or whatever, like anyone understands that feels wrong. It just feels immoral, dirty, and we are giving them answers that totally make sense. And it's like there's discrimination that we need to address, and we need to make it more fair. Now, because we appeal to everyone in the political spectrum, I believe that's the reason why the MRM is so fragmented, because we appeal to so many people, they come together, but we can't actually agree on the solutions, how to implement changes. Because so that's where I believe the fragmentation actually comes from the solution side of it, which it's an interesting thing about like the difference between the MRM and feminism. Because when it comes to feminism, it appeals to certain moral foundations like care and harm reduction. You're supposed to care about the women, and harm reduction towards the awful things that are happening to the women by the evil patriarchy. They appeal to liberty, the women are oppressed, therefore feminism gives them the liberty. It appeals to fairness, they believe that men have all of the power and they control women. That's not fair. So they're appealing to that, but they're leaving behind like a lot of things in the table because their solution is to invert everything. So they believe that in order to like get their quote unquote fairness, they need to be above and beyond. We all saw the many articles about how when you treat a woman better than a man, people see that as very like positive. They love that. But when you treat a woman equal to a man, and that it means being equally good, equally bad, equally dismissive, then all of a sudden people's opinions change. They don't like that. They don't like the idea of women being treated fairly, because that gives them actually gives them the possibility of women not getting like everything positive about like fairness. So feminism in itself doesn't really care about fairness. It just cares about like whatever positive results they can conjure out of, maybe a fair deal sometimes. So feminism cannot appeal to everyone. And there's a reason why they mostly appeal to very specific types of people. And we are getting the rest. We're getting everyone involved. But again, like, I think we need to talk about like solutions now, because I really believe that in a discussion about solutions, we are going to understand why the fragmentation comes about. So maybe like Taz, you would like to talk about a little bit of your solutions, things that you'd like to see, for example.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really glad you brought up Jonathan Haidt, because like for real solutions, and I don't mean, Band-Aids, or, tenuous and reversible policy decisions, or anything like that, but real solutions. The table that you mentioned, that Jonathan, put together, is where, creating solutions that are going to stay in place starts with, without being aware of and putting a value on the advantages of care over harm, and loyalty over betrayal, and sanctity, over corruption, and really all the rest of them. If one is no more important or no more desirable than the other, then the most brilliant people in the world could work for 1,000 years and they would never come up with workable solutions, because whatever they came up with, the target of that solution would shift to a place where that solution doesn't work anymore. And in practical terms, all you have to do is look at government policies, across the West. Most of the time, at least on paper or on the surface, public policies that they come up with are at least sold as solutions to problems that people go to them and complain about. Whether it's, education or welfare, or criminal rehabilitation, or mental health, or like food security, the housing, medical care. We have like convinced ourselves that if we give enough resources to, a government, or our government, or make those resources available to institutions, that by magic, they'll be able to put solutions in place that everyone will be able to work with, and the problem will be solved. But absent moral framework for the people looking to have those problems addressed, namely the public, if we don't have a moral compass to enact these solutions, like I said, it's like people that are a whole lot smarter than we are have been thinking about this for a really long time, and some of their solutions have been pretty creative, but two things happen. One, they are pointed at a problem, that has shifted away from the solution, so the solution doesn't work anymore. The other thing about it is a lot of these solutions, they're very vulnerable to being exploited, and corrupted, and misused, by people with bad intentions, right? People that are not just amoral, but immoral. Somebody that's amoral doesn't have morals, bad or good, and I say their problem is they're born into a world full of people who are not amoral, right? They're either moral or immoral. They're either morally good or morally bad, right? And the kind of people that are, just sort of morally neutral are always too few, and they tend not to stay that way anyway, So yeah, the solutions that we talk about, in men's rights meetings or on the Discord, You know, they're predicated on the idea that somebody will come up with a solution to, you know, the education problem for boys, or the homelessness problem for men, or the incarceration problem for men, certainly the mental health problem for men, that somebody will draw a map, you know, and work up a budget and say, here's how to get from where we are now to where we want to be. Here's how much it's going to cost. And here's who we're going to have, you know, put it all together and put it in play. Right. And then, you know, the benefactors of that, you know, that policy, or, you know, that action, namely, again, the public, to shrug their shoulders and say, okay, mission accomplished, problem solved. You know, now I'll go on about my business. And unfortunately, especially men, you know, we are not saints. We are not innocent here, especially men. Okay. We have a really bad habit of doing that. You know, we have a really bad habit of thinking that, you know, if the right guy is in office and he's got the right budget, you know, and he's got the support of, you know, the right inner circle, then we're square. Everything's all set and we don't even got to worry about it anymore. You know, and that, yeah, I'm going to put, you know, not entirely, but largely on us. You know, we're blind that way, right? You know, and the ones of us that are not, you know, again, people like men in the MRA, and women in the MRA, you know, like we know better, you know, the real original meaning of the taking of the red pill, you know, is awareness, right? It's waking up. It's, you know, becoming cognizant and seeing clearly, you know, that no matter who comes up, you know, with which brilliant idea, right? You know, no matter how much it or how little it costs, if everybody's not on board with it, it's not going to work. You know, it's not going to work. We're not, you know, we're not termites or bees, right? You know, we have to decide, you know, within ourselves that we want this to work and we're willing to do what it takes to make it happen, you know. And you know, civilizations are not unfamiliar with that kind of thing, you know, with that kind of collective will, you know, that we've experienced it in the past. You know, the only thing about it is that a lot of the time that kind of collective will gets absconded with by people with bad intentions and it gets exploited. You know, one really good example of that is, to be honest, most religions. You know, most religions are based on the idea of a collective will and a collective desire and a collective moral compass. But you know, the downside is, even if it takes a long time, over time, you know, the leadership and the direction, you know, of that collective, that community, you know, gets abducted and repurposed and corrupted for the interests of, like I say, you know, people who only care about themselves. Right. So, you know, the thing that marks for me, you know, the true men's rights movement, is the fact that, you know, we're not promising anybody any bed of roses. We're not promising anybody a can't miss deal, you know, and we're not promising anybody that, you know, if they buy our book, they're going to get lots of dates, right? You know, and at the same time, you know, we're still in a place where we still think there's time and we're not, you know, giving up in despair and bitterness. There's still some measure of faith, you know, in being able to rescue, this imbalance between men and women that we frankly, we did that to ourselves. I mean, we we don't have anybody else to blame but us. It's not something that was imposed on us by aliens from another planet. you know and if our forebears and even our recent elders had been paying more attention to the health of their community and their social order, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And the kind of things that happened to me, and the kind of things that happened to so many people that we've heard from that are part of our movement now never would have happened. That's not to say bad things, if we get our way, bad things will stop happening to people. That's ridiculous. But what we do about it, and the fact that there will be a desire to do something about it, will mean that it won't be those bad. We won't be doing it to ourselves. We as a society, we won't be shooting ourselves in the foot. People just living their lives have enough problems already. We don't need to manufacture and import more. But avoiding that means that, even after the budget gets cut and and gets funded, and the leaders are elected, there's still work for every individual to do. I mean, that's kind of unfortunate. I want to live in a world where, I can just pay my taxes once a year and make all my problems go away. I am never going to live in that world because I live in this world. And in this world, I still pay my taxes because I gotta, and at the same time, I know that, that's not going to turn the crank. Other things have to happen and nobody else is going to do it. So that's like I say, for specific solutions, you guys know, where my interests lie. That the beginning of it is willingness and attention and resources behind, healing and I guess respecting, our state of being, right? Our minds, our hearts, our behaviors, our souls, for lack of a better term. If we can look, the rest of the world as MRAs, if we can look the rest of the world in the eye and say, you can't tell me that I'm crazy or dangerous or toxic or unmanageable, because frankly, I'm better at it than you are. If we can do that, then the people that have power will more likely start listening to us and more likely start doing as we suggest, especially if we demonstrate that we're willing to do our part, and then to be able to point to, the others and say, look, you can either get on board with this or you can stay here, but this train is leaving. We are not going to stay here. And, you're welcome aboard if you want to come, but, if you want things to get better, you need to come over here where we are. Because if you stay there, you're going to be there. So, yeah.
I'm sure you both heard me say it before. One of the key things is men recognizing their own humanity first and foremost, and insisting on that their humanity be respected. I think that's a good starting point of solving the problems. The other one is feminism needs to go. There's a difference between feminism and women's rights. And I do not believe that And I think it's demonstrable that feminism is not a good thing. There are unfortunately plenty of adherents to the ideology, but there has been a change in, I would say, the last 10 years or so, to where people are questioning that ideology. They are questioning feminism more and more. And there are more and more women coming along and saying, this isn't what I was told it was. This isn't what I was sold on. And so eventually that might just go in our favor, as long as we can show and prove that we do not want to turn the clock back or anything else. We want women to continue to have the freedom to choose the lives that they want, as long as it's understood that there are consequences for those wants and desires and paths, as there are for us all. To a certain degree, we all make our own lives, and we all have to accept some responsibility for any struggles that may result. Obviously, a crime being committed against your person, particularly a violent crime, is not of your own doing. That's somebody else's choice, and the choice is removed from you. That is really the essence of being a victim. It's when the choice to not go through that experience is taken away. So yeah, I mean, first part of, I think, solving these, well, the obvious first part of solving these problems is recognizing that these problems exist, full stop. That goes the same with any problem. It's the old expression of first step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one. And I'm sure that's something, Taz, that you recognize from addiction recovery. The first route to your recovery is understanding that you've got a problem in the first place.
Yeah,
So,
it's, and it has to be recognized, and it has to be seen as inevitable. Right? In other words, for me to get better, I not only had to, because I spent a long time being a really bad drunk, knowing I was a really bad drunk. Like a lot of years of like, yeah, I'm drinking because I'm a drunk, but the other shoe that had to drop, was that it was never going to get better, and it was already getting much worse. Like I had to see that storm, coming on the horizon, and I had to know that I wasn't going to get to the other side of it. That it was going to take me out, right? And for the same thing is true, you're right, collectively. You mentioned an end of the feminist movement, and I get I get into that kind of discussion, right, over there, right? I say, what if it was, like, what if it was over tomorrow? It's like, what would a Tuesday afternoon in September look like, if we weren't at this? If you can't, and I tell them, I say, if you can't imagine that, right, then your unhappiness with all of this is never going to end. Right? Again, just like being a drunk, it will be there when you get up tomorrow. It'll be there when you get up 5 years from now, and your choices are, either do your part to bring it to an end, or leave it where it is. Neither one, always the same. Neither one of those is free. Neither one of those is easy, but one of them is a bargain and the other is a ripoff. Right. And and when they, like, I've been challenged the same way, it's like, well, you talk about bringing an end to feminism. How about bringing an end to the men's rights movement? I say, yeah, how about that? I can tell you you know, I can tell you what a Tuesday afternoon in September would look like post, post MRA, and I think I can make my case, but if you can't, then if I tell them, it's like, if it wasn't us doing this, if we stepped out of the way, who's left? Do you guys want to deal with the MGTOWs, incels, red pillars, and pickup artists? Because we can get out of the way and you can work with them.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like, good luck.
Yeah, we've said it before, haven't we? That if all this ended tomorrow, peace was declared and everyone was back to being somewhat cordial, we'd go back to watching cat videos and being covered in Cheeto dust. We wouldn't care anymore, but we don't have that choice. Somebody has got some, it's the battlefield and it's screaming, man down, medic, man down, medic, and people walking on by. That is really what being an MRA is.
Yeah.
It's being the one to scream man down medic on the battlefield.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, this thing I've got Tuesday, it is like a real, your analogy of the man down and medic, is too close to home. It's exactly that. I'm in the unfortunate position where I'm going to have to go in front of these people who are, young and enthusiastic and are just loaded with good intentions, and say, yeah, a lot of us are, bleeding to death in front of you. I'm very grateful that you're here, but you have to understand what you're going to be doing. It's not going to be any fun. And, you're not going to love us because we're, like all wonderful and everything you hope for, because we're not. When I started out, I was confused and terrified and angry and bitter and despairing. But I'm going to tell them I found a few of you, that were able to hang in with me and attend my wounds with me. I'm not that guy anymore. I'm this guy now. Congratulations to me. Right. And look right behind me. There's 10,000 other guys right behind me.
Yeah. So suit up. Because this is going to take a while.
Yep. It's not going to be cheap. When I was in the meeting today, the session today, we were talking about what it has taken for each of us, and this is what, 5 guys, that at any given time, I mean, probably total, I think there's like 8 or 9, but the kind of money that we've spent, it is just terrifying to think about. I mean, ourselves and through our insurance companies, of course, but a lot of it was out of pocket. The money, forget about the time, forget about the opportunity cost, forget about the productivity cost, all of which is probably more, and again, it's 5 guys, 5, and that's it.
Yeah. We've got tens of millions to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of empathy and, a lot of regard for the fact that it's hard to look at, because it is, but when we can't say that we're doing, society, when we can't say that we're doing what we can for men like me, who frankly, I think anybody would have at least a little bit of empathy for, I hope, But if we can't say that we're doing what we can, in that situation, why should it's like I ask people, why should I expect you to do right by boys in school? Why should I expect you to do right, in family court? Right? Why should I expect you to do right in, for equal protection under the law in general? Right? Because if you can't even see us, and if you've let us get to this pass, then no, I don't expect those kind of miracles yet. But one thing that I get challenged a lot on in certain circles is, the corresponding failure of women's mental health. And I respond with, yeah, it's pretty close to just as bad. And I said, the great thing about being a mentally ill man is there is a final backstop for us. They just round us up and put us in cages. And I said, but I just asked them, I said, when women's mental health gets as bad as ours, what are you going to do? Round them up? You're going to put them in cages? I don't think so. We're not prepared for that, for one thing. And for another thing, if we do, we'll never, we won't come back from that. That'll be the end of, our brand of civilization. So it's like, yeah, let's triage this and get our issues fixed, because the fact of the matter is, the mental health of women is declining, like catching up with us. I said, if you want to be scared about something, be scared about that. Because when that gets as bad as our situation, that's it. Shut off the lights and go home. We're done.
Yeah, I put the blame for the decline in women's mental health squarely in feminism as an ideology. To be quite honest with you, people may not like that, but it's just my thoughts on that one.
To be honest, I think that the decline is already there. It's just that nowadays they got better excuses. It's for example, for a woman suffering from narcissism, which I have friends who have family members that are like that, and it's always like a bingo game. They always tend up to be feminists because feminism gives them the tools and the excuses to reframe their mental illnesses as some sort of positive somehow.
Yeah.
And a lot of excuses that they use, and it doesn't help that a lot of therapists, they are very confused about how to deal with certain mental illnesses. There's a weird taboo about addressing the mental illnesses of women if they're not ready to say that they need to, first of all, take care of themselves, get better. It's an individual problem. They are the reason why things are going badly in their lives. But when it comes to certain therapists with a feminist leaning, well, they get into this this idea that maybe it's society that's at fault, and well, it gets into really dark places. So
True.
going back to the topic of solutions, I really think that the MRM needs to always be thought as a bottom-up system. There is no king or queen of the MRM dictating what we are saying and thinking and what we're gonna solve. It's
Right.
always bottom up. So
Right.
as individuals, we need to live by example, and we need to be the alternative that people need and deserve. Because right now, like when a feminist says that the role of a man is to fight against the evils of the patriarchy and and liberate the women, and then I don't know, like traditional conservatives, they say the role of a man is to fight for their women and fight for their nation. Those are the solutions and the mythos that they are like putting up there to be like, accept our narrative and you will be happy. And we actually need to be like the alternative that they deserve. To be like, instead of this being this very vague, nebulous warrior of the women or the nation, take a look at all of these issues that are actually going to affect you and affect your friends, and maybe join us because we have solutions, and we have a very uplifting message of of every single moral foundation that we can just throw it up to see which ones they like the most. We can just say it's like fairness, liberty, harm reduction. We can say it's a fight against subversion. We need to preserve sanctity against degradation. This is about loyalty or whatever. But I think that's the real solution. We need to be the alternative. And the alternative is a bottom-up approach, an individualist approach. We need to be the alternative. We need to be the uplifting message compared to what our ideological opponents are offering. Because right now they're just offering, feminism, offering men like you fight for women because you have the original sin of being born a man, and you fight against the evils of patriarchy, and you resign yourself as a castrator role. It's not very uplifting. I mean, it works for some men. I'm not gonna doubt that. If it makes them happy, then so be it, no problem. But for the rest of the men, it's not very uplifting. When it comes to traditional conservatism, I'm sure like it is very appealing to say, fight for your family and fight for your nation. That's perfectly okay. No problem with that. We can incorporate that. But we can also say, fight for your sons, fight for your brothers,
Yeah.
And actually, that's like, if you actually listen to like a lot of female MRAs, they actually come from that background, the background of, I want to protect my little brothers, or I want to protect like my husbands, That's
My
very
son.
appealing and uplifting.
Yeah. A son. Yeah, that's well, again, solution wise, the thing about feminism and asking or demanding that it be brought to an end is that regardless of the fact that frankly it isn't working, I mean, it's just, it didn't work out. Oh well. But I understand it being hard to let go of, because to a lot of people, mostly women, it represents I guess a banner of solidarity, and community, and mutual, at least in theory, mutual support, and mutual loyalty, and the problem with us fellas is that, our, I guess, very different, but very effective means, to be together, right, and to support each other, and to be a brotherhood. It's been corrupted for a long time, depending on who you listen to and believe in, The culprit is everything from Beelzebub to the capitalist industrialist, that all of them have robbed men of their ability, to be brothers. And that, because of that, we're all alienated from each other and ourselves one way or another, and so our problem is that, and again, I think the men's rights movement does a better job of this than, any other more recent movement, collective, whatever you want to say. We do a better job of stating clearly, that we want to be together, and we want to take care of each other, and we want to support each other, and we don't want anything of our own at the expense of any other man, or anyone, right? We want better because better is good, duh. And the Dead Duck, you were talking about, demanding an end to feminism, and I think the case can pretty easily be made, that if you were getting, if feminists were really honestly getting, what they claim they want out of all of this, then I would say leave it alone. I would say leave it where it is, let it do its thing.